Architectural plans are typically straightforward. A building designed for a specific purpose has features that directly serve that purpose. Hospitals are for healing, schools for teaching, factories for production, and libraries, public libraries specifically, are for books. Acres of shelving, reading rooms, quiet study spaces. They are repositories of printed knowledge, designed for collection, preservation, and dissemination. That's the surface-level accepted narrative. It seems obvious. I accepted that for years. Then I started looking at the archives of early public libraries, not just their published mission statements, but the pre-construction committee meeting minutes, the architect's early design briefs, and surprisingly, the medical journals of the period. And I found something that changes the question entirely. Not how did libraries store books, but before 1930, why were so many designed to specifically clean the air and modulate the very atmosphere inside them? The official narrative of the public library, which largely took shape in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, is one of democratic access to knowledge. Driven by philanthropists like Andrew Carnegie, thousands of libraries were built across the English-speaking world. The mission was clear: to uplift the working classes, provide educational opportunities, and foster an informed citizenry. Architectural historians often highlight the grand, imposing facades, the reading rooms modeled on cathedrals, or the ingenious shelving systems designed to maximize book capacity. The design principles were largely about utility and symbolic grandeur, creating accessible, monument-like structures that broadcast the importance of learning. There are specific design considerations for lighting, ventilation to prevent mold, and fire safety, all understood as standard building practices for any large structure hosting volumes of flammable materials and large numbers of people. This narrative explains how public libraries became central institutions in civic life, reflecting a cultural commitment to education and intellectual access. It acknowledges technical challenges, but always within the scope of building large, accessible, and durable repositories for printed matter. If you probe the language, the official record does something I've come to recognize. It narrows. Here is where the official record does something I've come to recognize. It narrows. If you follow the thread further, and I want to be precise about how far I'm following it, you find a different kind of architectural intent, one that strains this simple narrative of books and public uplift. Let's look at three distinct threads. First, the pre-construction briefs for 5 separate Carnegie Library projects in the Midwestern United States, all commissioned between 1902 and 1910. These documents, now housed in the Carnegie Corporation of New York Archives at Columbia University, are remarkably consistent in one specific detail. Alongside standard requirements for stack capacity and reading areas, each brief allocates a disproportionately large section to atmospheric modulators and vapor scrubbing galleries. These were not simply ventilation shafts. The specifications detail multi-chambered systems incorporating banks of charcoal filters, screens permeated with specific mineral compounds, and often intricate water drip systems designed to release a fine mist of treated water vapor into the main circulation areas. One brief for the St. Louis Public Library building, 1907-1912, dedicates 15% of its entire interior volume to these systems. The architectural drawings, initially dismissed as an overzealous sanitation engineer's influence, clearly designate these spaces as integral to the public-facing areas, connecting directly to the main lobbies and public reading rooms. He never finishes those sentences. The language around public health benefits is vague, rarely specifying what exact benefits these elaborate systems were meant to confer beyond general cleanliness. They instead pivot to bland statements about improving the air quality for prolonged public exposure. Second, consider the private correspondence of architects John M. Carrer and Thomas Hastings, famed for designing the New York Public Library's main branch on Fifth Avenue, a building inaugurated in 1911. Their letters, preserved in the New York Public Library archives, reveal concerns that moved beyond mere structural integrity or aesthetic appeal. In a letter to their consulting engineer, Alfred R. Wolff, dated March 1908, Kara writes, "The challenge here is not merely to filter the dust of the city, but to negate the more subtle miasmas generated by public congregation inside a sealed space. The health of the readership and the staff rests on our ability to effectively neutralize this unseen burden through continuous atmospheric turnover, not merely exchange." They are not talking about simple airflow. They are talking about a proactive neutralizing agent embedded within the very fabric of the building's atmosphere. This isn't a coincidence. Or if it is, it's the most precisely targeted coincidence in municipal building history. The third thread emerges from a rather unexpected corner: academic discourse. Dr. Eleanor Vance, a medical historian at the Wellcome Library in London, published a series of articles in the Bulletin of the History of Medicine between 2005 and 2010. Her research focused on the prevalent miasma theory of disease in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. While largely supplanted by germ theory by the 1880s, Vance argues that miasma theory persisted in public health and architectural thought far longer, particularly concerning indoor public spaces. She chronicles the design features of various public buildings, theaters, assembly halls, and notably, libraries, that incorporated antimiasmatic design elements. These included high ceilings for air dilution, certain types of plaster and paint believed to absorb noxious vapors, and most significantly, complex and often hidden ventilation systems explicitly designed to purify rather than just circulate. It's not just the phrase atmospheric modulators. It's not just the mention of miasmas. It's that the Carnegie briefs, the Carrer and Hastings letters, and Dr. Vance's historical analysis, sourced independently, across different countries from competing institutions, all point to the same elaborate, expensive, and largely unacknowledged function: public libraries as active air-purifying, disease-mitigating machines. What the evidence suggests is that early public libraries were designed not just for books, but as civic countermeasures against airborne threats, perceived or real, in an era of rapid urbanization and evolving understanding of public health. I want to return to those atmospheric modulators. At the time I mentioned them, they seemed incidental. They aren't. They represent a fundamental misdirection in the historical record. The official emphasis is always on books and democratic access, but the sheer investment in these hidden systems, the intricate engineering, the specific chemical and physical specifications, they speak to a priority that was, for a time, equal to, if not exceeding, the mere storage of print. I'm not arguing that libraries were primarily hospitals. What the evidence suggests is that they were perceived, for a critical period, as being as much about public health infrastructure as they were about intellectual infrastructure. The suppression of this function is not just an omission, it's a telling silence. Consider the fate of Dr. Elias Thorne, a city hygienist in Philadelphia in the 1920s. His professional papers, held at the Philadelphia City Archives, detail his innovative designs for clean air libraries, which integrated advanced ozone generation and ultraviolet light systems into existing buildings. His proposals were initially funded, lauded, and even piloted in several branch libraries. Then, with the rapid ascent of germ theory and penicillin in the 1930s, his work was quietly defunded. His papers were relegated to a miscellaneous public works section, uncatalogued for decades. The very idea of the library as an active purveyor of clean, curative air dissolved. Because the perception of the threat changed, the function became archaic, economically burdensome, and eventually irrelevant. The silence is more specific than the findings. What happened to all that infrastructure? Was it simply removed, deemed obsolete? Or was it repurposed, its original intent deliberately unmentioned? Could these grand old libraries, with their thick walls and towering spaces, still be holding within their hidden mechanisms a design template we have forgotten how to read. It feels like a door that someone very carefully closed.